Welcome everyone to our second Out of the Depths presentation this year, which is our live streamed series at Drift. And these presentations are designed to expose you to new locations and opportunities across Canada, along with the guides and the instructors that we feel you really need to know, really rich resources for information. If you're interested in experiencing some of these opportunities, we would highly suggest you hire the guides that we're featuring on the series. Their in-depth and valuable knowledge will elevate your experience on the water for sure. So don't struggle where you don't have to, and make the most out of your time out there. If you do find these presentations useful and entertaining, we would encourage you to consider supporting the shop that is supporting you with these live streams. Buying direct from manufacturers or big box stores directly cuts out your local fly shops. The fly shops that can best provide you the service that you need, host community building events, and contribute to preserving and protecting your local waterways. So we'd encourage you to ask yourself, are the businesses that you're supporting you? You can shop with us online, in shop, or by the phone. And remember, orders over $175 shipped for free in Canada. This week's guest, let him introduce himself because he's going to be better at than me, is Tyler Dunn from Tyler Dunn Guiding. He's up in the Sault, which we'll be talking about tonight, but also guides a whole whack of other destinations in that kind of area of Ontario. So Tyler, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you get into it? What are you up to these days?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Chris, for having me on the show. I'm glad we're starting off with my home waters, the St. Mary's River. I've been fishing this area, the St. Mary's, pretty well my entire fishing career as a guide. That started about 10 years ago. I've been doing it full time for about 7 years now. But I began fishing the St. Mary's as I don't know, I was probably about 14, 15 years old. Going down to St. Mary's Rapids, fishing steelhead and salmon and stuff like that, as most kids do around here. That actually grew into a writing job for me as a freelance writer. I started doing some little gigs on the side for magazines, online magazines, which catapulted me into some guide trips. I'd say about the end of my late 20s, and that got the ball rolling with starting it full time, which I've been enjoying since I've been about 32, 33 years old. So it's been year 7 or 8 this year. And yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Very cool. And I should note as well, still housekeeping stuff, that everyone is in muted mode right now. We'll ask that you stay that way just through the talk, but this is a Q&A. So if you have questions, we'd love to hear them, and we'll answer them as they come up. All that we would ask is just that you use the chat function, which you can open up at the bottom of your screen, just so that we don't have interruptions from the audio or anything. And we'll go through that. So Tyler, we're talking about the Sault today. From what I understand, not strictly the rapids as well. Is that right?
No, exactly. We're going to talk the St. Mary's Rapids, of course, but the Sault Ste. Marie area in general, which in particular means downtown Sault Ste. Marie. There's lots of options down there for shore anglers, boat anglers, wading, fly fishing, spin fishing, float fishing. But I'm also going to touch on a little bit about the entire river, a little downriver around St. Joe's Island, Thessalon, Deborah area. That's where we do a little bit more of the bass and the walleye and the pike and stuff like that. But I'll touch on to that later on throughout this presentation. As I started, I just want to let everybody know this is the first time I've used PowerPoint apps, so bear with me. I might hit a couple wrong buttons throughout it, but I think I got it down. And what I'll do is we'll start off with wrong button to start right here. So we'll start with the rapids, and I want to begin with more of the different seasons of the rapids.
We'll get through it.
Yeah. I don't know why. There we go. The St. Mary's Rapids itself is about 120 kilometers long. Begins around Sault Ste. Marie. It extends down to, I believe, Detour, Michigan is roughly where the start of the river begins. But the rapids itself is about 1 kilometer long. I think it's 1.2 kilometers. It's about a 1/4 mile wide. The problem with the St. Mary's Rapids is the water levels are never the same. They're man regulated through the International Joint Water Commission, which is, I believe, held in Washington, D.C. and in Ottawa. And between those two places, they come up with settings of the water levels each month. And for the last 6 or 7 years, we've had pretty well the highest water I've ever experienced in my life. I think there's 16 gates in total, 8 Canadian, 8 American. Right now, we're at a 2-gate setting for winter, which is pretty manageable for fishing. But I believe for the last 6 or 7 years, it's been about 8 gates in the summertime, which can be a handful for most people that aren't familiar with the rapids. It's very intimidating. It's fast, deep, kind of scary water at times. It's an open water fishery pretty well year round. As I mentioned before, it's spring, summer, fall, winter, but winter is a little bit tough. The only access to the rapids is from the Canadian side. Americans have to cross over, come through our customs, and access it through our lock system. Next up, we'll probably chat a little bit about the four seasons of the runs of fish. Spring, we start with the steelhead, and there's always the resident rainbow trout. Summer, we still have the rainbow trout, and that's when the Atlantic salmon show up. Typically, this is about end of June, early July, and they'll run until about mid-August. That's when pink salmon start to show up in the rapids. We do get a run of coho salmon still, but it's not what it used to be. I don't really guide too much for the cohos anymore. We'll basically target the steelhead around our Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, and that runs until first week of December typically.
Right on. I feel like the area obviously has great resident rainbow trout fisheries, but it always seems like that gets a little less press for people not familiar.
Yeah.
The quality of fish there is pretty astounding.
Yeah, like honestly, I would say the average resident rainbow is probably in about the 20-inch range. We get them 12 to 20 inches all the time, but we get like a significant amount of fish every year from the 20 to 27, 28 inch. I've even seen 30-inch resident rainbow trout caught. I would consider a fish over 22, 23 inches on the St. Mary's as a really big resident trout. And I will say the odd one people do keep to eat. I'm not huge on eating them myself, but we do catch the odd fish that's bleeding, dropped or whatever, and we do let people keep the odd rainbow trout from the St. Mary's River.
Very cool. And so as far as seasons go, you're talking. Is there any sort of barrier in the spring, like you would say, not show up prior to? I know you say it's a 360.
Yeah. It's funny. I have that written down here for just prime time, busy time. April is probably when I'll start going in on average every year, depending on our runoff on the weather. Yep. But it doesn't really get busy in the rapids until about our long weekend, our May long weekend, and the American long weekend. It's an absolute gong show usually for people. It's very busy. If someone's not looking to fish a busy time of the year, I'd stay away from that. Reason being, there's a lot of fish on that time of the year. But I'd recommend coming a little bit after. Usually after the American Memorial Day weekend, people start doing other things. You know, they're going into flying walleye lodges. A lot of guys are fishing inland walleye by that time. They're doing the salmon thing on the Great Lakes. But there's still a lot of steelhead in our rapids. They're all post spawn, and they're all just kind of hanging around waiting to eat food. Especially with the high water, it's been cool. Full water in June. There's been lots of food around, so there really isn't a reason for a lot of the fish to leave right away. So they'll hang around typically. The last couple of years, it's been almost the whole month of June has fished well for steelhead, with the resident rainbow in the mix. Sure. Yeah.
Not a bad mix to have.
No.
And then in the looking towards sort of later half of the year, you say that Steelhead is sort of Thanksgiving and onwards. Before
Yeah,
that,
that's when the first big push of steelhead usually shows up into the rapids, is roughly the beginning of October, Thanksgiving type of deal.
yeah,
That said, like I said, the last couple of years we've had cold, high water through the summer, and we've had pretty good numbers of fish kind of hanging around throughout the whole entire summer. But someone that's looking to plan a trip in the fall, specifically for the fall steelhead, I would recommend the second, third, and fourth week of October for probably the best time for big fish, numbers of fish, and nice weather, because November can be hit and miss here in the Sioux. With one year it could be warm, next year it could be frozen, and it can get pretty ugly in the rapids.
sure. And so I'm looking at this list. So the Atlantics, you say the prime sort of season is into August. Do you?
Yep.
How's the fishing later into the year? So if I think of, say, East Coast Atlantics.
Well, yeah, we always have the Atlantic salmon. They're stocked on the American side. Lake State University actually puts them in every summer. So we have basically a year-round resident population, we call them.
I
They're
see.
2-year-old fish, two, I think sometimes 3-year-old fish is what we call the resident population. So we're catching Atlantic salmon literally all months of the year. We've caught them through the ice even. But the main run from the Lake Huron, the fish that are coming up following the smelts, you're talking that's July. Yeah, that's the best month for that would be the month of July.
And so you say following the smelts, and sorry again if I'm getting
Yeah.
ahead of myself, maybe is the main draw for those salmon following a forage versus spawning?
They're following smelts. Yeah,
Interesting.
smelts, and there's a massive caddisfly hatch here in the summertime.
Yep.
So a lot of those smelts are following the caddisflies, and the Atlantic are right behind, feeding on the smelts. You're right. Most Atlantic salmon fishermen think, fish are coming in the fall to spawn, and they're not really moving around too much, which they're not. We're here; they're actually here to feed. They're busting surface, chasing baits. Multiple fish days aren't uncommon. Don't get me wrong; they can be Atlantic salmon. You can go a day or two without seeing one, and then the next day you pop 4 or 5. It's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, next. Got a couple of pictures here I'll run for people to see. This is just kind of the spring. This is general month, April, May, and June. These are your typical steelhead in the rapids. I think these are all from this year. I'd say the average fish in the St. Mary's Rapids is about 4 to 7 pounds for steelhead. Couple more. I didn't know how many pictures to put on these.
Everyone's a sucker for fish pictures.
Yeah. So now we're getting into the summertime. As we we're talking, the Atlantic salmon here on the right hand side. That's a bigger fish. I believe that was about a 33, 34 inch fish. Yeah. One of the better ones I've seen in my boat, actually. I have seen bigger fish caught. That's on the bigger side for Atlantic salmon around the Sioux. The fish on the left, that would be a resident rainbow. It's a good sized fish, 23, 24 inch fish. That was caught swinging I believe, a small bucktail fly, Ben. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a small fly. I remember that. In the middle of summer. Yeah, there's a summer steelhead. That was caught last summer, actually, in the rapids. That's got to be mid to end of June. On the right hand side, we're fly fishing at the base of the rapids. You can see a powerhouse in the back. We're swinging flies at the base of the currents. Like I said, every year is different. The last couple of years, that's been an effective method, is just kind of drifting down with the boat, swinging flies on the current breaks or on rocks, any kind of structure. We see fish busting, of course. We'll swing over there. Some more Atlantics. These are the summer run fish. You can tell they're bright silver bullets. Very healthy. You can see a plastic minnow and actually the right hand side fish. That's resembling a smelt.
It's
We do
awesome.
get the odd lake trout. We get the odd lake trout for the lake trout lovers, if there is any.
Yeah.
They're just kind of in the mix. You get the odd one in the mix, summertime, fall time.
Yeah, cool surprise to have. And like, it's probably important to note, I assume a lot of people watching us sort of inherently understand this, but it's probably some who don't. This is pretty well the only viable, you know, targetable population of Atlantic salmon in a river in, you know, in Ontario, or
It is.
in Ontario, Michigan, you know.
It's the only one I know of in North America that I believe you can catch summer Atlantic salmon and summer steelhead, I believe.
Yeah,
I've
it's
been
pretty
told
cool.
that. Yeah, it's a very cool mix. And you know what? People sometimes don't like calling them Atlantic salmon. They're landlocked salmon, which they're correct. We just call them Atlantics, always have. Just something we call them around here. But they are landlocked salmon. They're not sea-run Atlantic salmon.
Yep.
But I just want to make that clear before people start hating on that. 'Cause some do. But they fight like the true Atlantic salmon. They leap 6-7 feet out of the water, rip and line. You know, people always ask me to compare it to a fight, and it's like a steelhead on steroids. Actually, they have the quickness of a steelhead, the power of a steelhead, and they jump higher and more frequently sometimes. So it's really hard to compare it to another fish when you catch them in their prime conditions, middle of the summer.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, I got some fall stuff here. This is a big draw in the St. Mary's River. I started off with some pink salmon here. Growing up here in the Sioux, it's just something that most locals take for granted because we've always just go downtown and catch our pink salmon in the fall like we always do. But it's a huge draw for out of town people, out of country people. Everybody goes to Alaska for pink salmon, BC even, and they come to the Sioux and they see how many fish you can catch right downtown the Sioux. Basically, they're all around you. They're not very finicky on flies. You gotta be here at the right time because they're only really on the rapids for a couple weeks, and then after that, they're fishing zombies and they're pretty much dead after about 2-3 weeks of being in the rapids.
Sure.
But the sheer numbers of fish, it's great fly fishing practice. That's what I always tell people that want to do pink salmon fishing is bring someone that's maybe new to it. Kids, wives that don't fly fish, because typically you get a lot of bites, a lot of action. You don't have to cast very far. It's very visual. You're also seeing other fish. You give a chance at a steelhead, a chance at a Chinook salmon that time of the year that's still in good shape. But the pink salmon itself is fun to catch. I don't recommend eating them, but as far as catch and release, for a fun day of fly fishing, it's hard to beat.
That's cool. And did you say like short season sort of ballpark when?
Yeah, they show up typically. I actually run my pink salmon trip from about the first week of September to about the third week of September. So generally it's like Labor Day weekend until the end of the month for the most part. The whole month of September generally you can fish the pinks, but prime time I would say is the second and third week.
Right. Just a quick question of what quality those fish are still in, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
And then this is a couple pictures of actually a couple rivers off of the St. Mary's that the salmon run up. Where I will fish there with guys when there's water. This year I fished pretty well actually. We had some nice water levels early fall. But some years the water isn't that high and the fish don't go up that far. But with years we do have water. It's a fantastic place to fish. Quiet, you're away from anybody else. But the rapids, September can be busy with the pinks with people, obviously.
Yep.
More pictures of the pinks. Oh, same picture twice. Okay, the kings usually show up. They show up. They really do show up in August, but they don't show up thick probably until September now anymore. They used to show up a little bit earlier, I found. But the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, it's been well in September before we got the big pushes of fish.
Cool. Sorry, I wanted to just backtrack quickly to the pinks again, because I know most places it's an alternate year run, right? It's every other year they get pinks, but there it is an annual of thing?
Yeah, here we get them every year. We do see a better run every second year, which would be the even number years.
Yep.
But we get a run every single year. And quite frankly, both runs are extremely good fish.
Yep.
This year, I would say the average is about 2 to 5 pounds, maybe 3 to 5 pounds. Where next year they'll probably be about 2 to 4 pounds. But
Yep.
we're getting fish 6, 7, 8 pounds every year. I know the Ontario record is caught in the same areas. I believe it was 13 pounds,
That's a
which
big.
is a big pink. I've never seen nothing like that before. But we're seeing a lot of Canucks show up actually too now. They're the hybrid. They look like a pink on steroids. It looks like a Chinook salmon with a pink head. Kind of a freaky looking thing, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, there's I've done a couple shows with the new fly fisher for Chinooks in the St. Mary's Rapids. You can find those on YouTube. What else we got? Yeah, some late season Atlantics. They're always in the rapids too. There's some fish that spawn in there in the fall time. That's not later in the fall until around November. You'll see some fish and they're spitting eggs, but they're usually spawning out in the deeper on the American side. Basically, you don't see them up on our side very often. Nice big steelhead on the right.
Yeah, a couple questions. So, yeah, first one is kind of, what should people expect going up there? Is it more of a boat fishing destination or a good opportunity?
No, it's actually both. It really is both. It's intimidating going out in the boat, especially if you haven't been here either ever before. It's comparable to fishing the Niagara River. I like to put it that way. Like the boat fishing, we fish at Braid all the same way. The spin guys are doing this freeway swivels, some trolling, stuff like that. I would recommend probably doing a wade trip first if you want to come up and do it yourself trip. Do a wade trip first. You can kind of get a little gist of the water levels and see what other guys are doing. But if you do have a boat, there's boat launches right downtown the Sioux at Bellevue Marina. That gives you access to the upper river. You can take the locks through even from right there, go up to Superior. But if you're a seasoned Niagara River fisherman, you do just fine out there.
Sure. And so the follow-up question from that was just asking how strong kind of the current is and if a 14-foot boat would be enough. Before you answer that, what I'll just kind of preface that with saying is that, like Tyler says, it's a big piece of water. So I think regardless of size of the boat, you got to use some real caution up there and there's, I'm sure, some present danger.
Yeah. You know what? A 14-foot boat is fine. You're definitely not going to want to go out there on a heavy east wind, especially east wind that's going upriver. The east wind is the current going down river going upriver kind of makes you double bangers, especially downtown the Sioux. You're not going to want to be out there on a 14-foot boat. Anything more than, say, a 30K east wind, don't go out there. But when we grew up as a kid, we used a 12-foot boat to 6 for us out there all the time. It took us a while to get places, but we got there. So there's no reason a 14-foot boat with whatever you have from outboard would be just fine. You might not want to fish the base of the rapids with the high water, but you'll be just fine on the Canadian side. Pretty well all through the river in the 14-foot boat.
Cool. And then for somebody who was thinking about wading it, I know you talked briefly about the gates at the start there. Is there a source that somebody could look at for seeing how
I believe if you look at the water office, it should be on there, the St. Mary's River. If not, our local news agency has, I think, a monthly release on the water levels. So if you go on Sault today and Google St. Mary's River water levels, I'm sure the news release will come up. But basically, if you're coming to fish the rapids in waders on your own, there's no problem, especially if you're a seasoned wader guy, you'll be just fine out there. Bring a wading staff, studded boots are almost a must. We have a new invasive species called Didymo. It's in the rapids. It's a plant. It kind of looks like pulp from a paper mill in the water, and it's a plant that coats all the rocks. We call it rock snot, but it's actually a plant. And it's not good for spawning fish, obviously, but it's really slippery. And I see guys all the time taking pretty good wipeouts on the dynamo. So that's what you want the studs for, is the rocks, not the dynamo, and the wading staff. And anybody that's uncomfortable wading out there, just always have 2 of the 3 planted, 2 feet while you're moving your wading staff, and 1 wading staff and 1 foot always at all times, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, and don't push it.
And don't push it. And when the water is high, you'll see where you can't push it. It's pretty simple. If the water's coming over the berm, if you're not in really good shape and willing to go for a swim, just don't even go over there. It's not rocket science out there. When it's a little bit hairy, it's not rocket science. It's pretty black and white.
Yep, got it.
Yeah.
Cool. We had another question, which again, I feel like we're probably going to circle back to, and if we are, maybe just tell me and we can circle back.
That's fine.
But
That's fine.
I'll just ask him about equipment recommendations.
Yeah, actually,
I
have a slide coming up here.
Yeah, like I said, if you're circling around to it, then no need to rush to
Yeah, I'm coming up right now. Actually, with equipment
Okay.
recommendations, rods, reels, slides, and some tackle coming up. This is the fly fishing stuff. For swinging setups, I recommend a 7/8 weight, like a 9-foot, kind of your standard steelhead river rod. Is fine. Floating line. Some guys like you have the sink tip that's built right into the lines. I've been using, actually, I have it over here. Airflow has those 10-foot sections you can just attach to your floating line.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Danforth Battle gave me a couple of them, and they've been working great. Just adding it on, without having to switch the lines out every year. But as far as nymphing setups, I actually like to use a bit of a smaller rod. Myself personally, I like to use a 6 or 7 weight. 9-foot length too, but just a 6 or 7 weight usually is what I like to use, especially when the pinks are in. I'll even go down to, I have a 5 weight I'll mess around the pinks with once in a while. But a 6 or 7 weight is typically what you want for a nymphing setup, even with steelhead or the rainbows. The Atlantics can be a little sporty on a 6 and 7 weight. I don't know if I'd recommend that one, but you stick with your steelhead setup for Atlantics, you'll be just fine. And I'm using floating line indicator stuff with the nymphing setup. I've never done the Euro nymphing thing myself yet, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. So if you're a Euro nympher, just bring the setup you guys use down south, and I'm sure it'll be just fine in the rapids. And now I have a list of just some general flies for swinging. We're doing smelt patterns, like I talked about the smelt run, which usually May, June into July, we have a lot of smelt hanging around the river. Other minnow patterns like base minnow, that's a great pattern in the rapids year round. Leech patterns, sculpin patterns, and of course crayfish. Crayfish really picks up as the water warms in the summertime, and the fish feed pretty heavily on the crayfish throughout the fall too.
Right on.
And then for nymphs and stuff, I'm just a lot of eggs, especially in the fall when there's all the salmon. Salmon is just, it's egg city. So a lot of eggs in September and October. In the springtime, stoneflies, your standard stonefly stuff, prince nymphs. Like I have woolly buggers on there. I'll even run some of those under the indicator.
Cool. And earlier you mentioned the big caddis hatch that you get up there. How it relates. Yeah. Anything? I mean, I feel like all this is pretty staple Great Lakes stuff. But anything you particularly want on the caddis, or?
Green caddis. Green is just any kind of green caddis, different stages. I'm really familiar with every single stage of the caddis fly. I'm really not. But I have a bunch of variations of different kinds of caddis flies, and they all seem to work. It's almost day to day. And I just see someone elaborating on fly size. I see that there now. For fly sizes, for streamers and stuff, you want 2 to 3 inch streamers. That's probably the best size. We will get them on bigger flies. Like I have pink hobo here that actually Mike Seward tied. That's a nice fly that Mike tied. Smelt 2 flies here. These 2 flies are probably 3 to 4 inches here, and that's on the bigger size, but they do work pretty well. Now these are smaller tubes. I think that'd be a dace minnow right there, something like that. No, that's a dace. Sorry. Dace right there with 3 inches in length. Pretty sparse flies actually.
Mhm.
And then for the nymphs, we're doing lots of stuff in the 10 to 14 size. As the caddisfly hatch kind of gets thicker throughout the summer, smaller. When there's Atlantic salmon, when they're in the rapids heavy, small flies is where it's at. Even when the smelts are in, for whatever reason, especially in the nymphs, size 14, 12, 14, even 16. I generally don't go down that far, but I see a lot of guys fishing flies that small and they do quite well.
Cool. And are you just for the caddis specifically? Are you just sort of straight nymphing those for the most part, or do you swing them?
Nymphing them. No, swinging them too. Yeah, no, absolutely. Swinging small flies. And people have hooked a few Atlantics on the dry flies. I've had actually 2 clients hook Atlantics on dry flies. We don't do it much. I should probably do a little bit more.
Cool.
My client Kelly Barr, actually, she's the first person to do it, and she did it all on her own. She's seen the fish rising. She told me she was gonna put on a dry. I was kind of like, okay. Sure enough, she hooked it. I learned something that day. Yeah.
And how was I gonna say? So yeah, when you're talking about dries, you're thinking more sort of natural caddis dries. You're not talking East Coast bombers and bugs and that sort of thing.
Oh no. But you know what? I haven't seen the bombers work on the pink salmon.
Oh really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen them work on the pink salmon, those bombers. But no, it's a little bit different than those Atlantic flies, for sure. Think steelhead. That's the best thing I can put it. Think steelhead when you're fishing Atlantics in the summer here, and you'll do just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually missed a question earlier from Mallory asking how far in advance would you recommend booking a guided trip?
Typically I always tell people 6 to 8 months. But you know what? Even further, it's all dependent on what you want to fish. Like if for spring steelhead, you want to start booking pretty soon. But like for my pink salmon trips in September, where I'm only doing that for about 2 weeks of the year, sometimes maybe 3, you want to book that as soon as possible because there's only 20 days in total that are available, and they do book up quite quickly, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's similar to, I'm not going to touch on like my Nipigon trips. There's only so many a year I do. If someone wants to book those, but the steelhead, I live here and I'm here. I can plan a steelhead trip a lot easier than other trips.
Yep, makes sense. And we'll make sure that your contact is available to everyone. But if anyone was to Google Tyler Dunn guiding, I'm sure it'd come up.
Yeah, I got a little at the end of this thing. I have my email and my website, stuff like that.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I was getting to touch on some float fishing because you guys do support the float fishing market, and I float fish a lot myself. A lot of float fishing clients. This is just general rod and reels, 11 to 14 foot rod. I run a 13.5 foot rod myself. I run a Raven RV9, 4 to 5 inch stand up and reel, 10 to 12 pound main line, 5 to 20 gram floats, just standard steelhead setups. Beads, marabou jigs, nymphs, dew worms, spawns, different plastics. A lot of guys around here don't run the marabou jigs. Anybody coming up here looking to fish something a little bit different, but a lot of fish around here don't see jigs.
Yeah.
So if you're a good jig fisherman and you're up here, run jigs. Now I almost guarantee you'll catch some fish on the jig.
Wicked. That makes sense. Yeah. So you say 5 to 20 gram floats. That makes sense. Just thinking about varied water types. It looks like you've got some pretty soft, it's pretty heavy.
Exactly. You can be fishing riffle water in the rapids where it's 2-3 feet, and walk 20, 30 feet downriver, and you fish the Canadian hole. It's 20 feet deep. Some spots probably at certain times of the year. So yeah, but if I had to pick one float size, I just like an 8 gram fast and deep Raven float. That's a good all around float for the rapids.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had another quick question going back to the gear. I know you mentioned mainly a single hand setup up there. I think that just goes to show how versatile those setups are. The fact that you can still tackle a big river. But for somebody who wants to swing flies with a 2-handed rod, we have a lot of people you want to do that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I feel like there's pretty well no limit as to what you could take gear wise.
No, no, the Rapids is actually, I do guys with the two handers myself. I'm just starting to do it. I had Jeff Parks up Nipigon this year. He taught me how to do the single hand spay. So I've been messing around with that a little bit, but the Rapids is probably one of the best places to spay fish. I would never tell someone not to come up here to spay fish. It's probably the best place in this area to spay fish to be the Rapids compared to our rivers north or anywhere south of here. The Rapids is a two-handed paradise for the most part. Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
no, for sure. It's definitely I've seen a trend in the last 4 or 5 years of more guys doing it for sure.
Yeah,
yeah,
big
sure.
down here.
Yeah,
so and then kind of follow up on that from the same person. Could you speak to, or again, if you're going to touch on this in a little bit, then feel free to put her off. But if somebody was looking to target Atlantics in general, are there some sort of suggested stretches in particular for somebody to access, or is there certain types of water that they relate to versus others?
Yeah, surprisingly shallow. They're not as deep as I would have thought. It's a lot. Use your eyes. Very visual. It's a lot of spot and stock. It's don't even cast blind a lot of times. A lot of times is walk down berm. Use your eyes. Sight fish these fish. Lead them with casts. You're going to see them coming up for bugs. So I highly recommend good glasses and a lot of sight fishing. Like cast at in particular targets or even fish if you can see them. But it's not as I wouldn't concentrate. I would concentrate on the faster, shallower water for the Atlantics for the most part. To be honest, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great tip, and you find that pretty steady through the season. Does that?
But that's actually probably most prevalent in August when most of the fish do leave the main river and move into the rapids for the cooler water than the food sources. So that's one reason those fish will nose up towards the compensating gates, which that water's moving pretty quick. It's not all that deep in some spots, and that's where you'll see those fish moving.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. What do we got next here? Yeah, and there's for the additional fishing opportunities. I'll just start with the smallmouth, largemouth bass. We have a phenomenal bass fishery. You can go right up from the Sioux and take a boat and head downriver, but usually I'll trailer my boat further down and use a couple launches down towards St. Joe's Island area, and that's where we do most of my bass trips. Is 20 minutes east of the Sioux on the San Mary's River. But it's phenomenal fishing, and they do have a season. It's the end of June it opens, where the rest of Algoma we have an open bass season year round. So that's about the only place around the Sioux that you still have a bass season that you can't fish bass until June. But we have big fish, and we're fishing at very typical, fishing docks, weed lines, lily pads. We're doing frogs, poppers, all kinds of stuff like that.
Sweet. Those are big fish. That's not stuff.
Yeah, you know what? The bass fishery in the same areas has been overlooked for years, and it probably always will be. Most guys do come for the salmon, for the rainbow trout, and then there's a huge walleye fishery too that should pop up here soon. There's a lot of walleye tournaments on the St. Mary's, more out of the American side. But a lot of the boys on our Canadian side now are big into the walleye scene. Lots of walleye boats, tournaments, lots of just walleye fishermen too.
Cool. And I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like you look at every other connector, Great Lakes, the Niagara, the St. Clair, Detroit, like they all have terrific bass and walleyes.
Yeah, and the same thing as these walleye, they kind of show up after the smelt come up here. They kind of follow the food up in the summertime as they'll show up, start of June, typically early June, but the fishing doesn't get really good probably until about the end of June while the smelts are in. And they kind of take off around the same time as the Atlantic start coming back down river once the food leaves.
Right. Makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
And so just a couple questions that popped up there quickly. So we're just asking if there's much of a fly bite for the Atlantics. I assume, I mean, I could look like a smelt or any other bait fish
Yeah,
species. Yes.
yeah. Actually, I think I got one right here. That's the fly. A local guy ties up right there for exactly fry for the Atlantics. That's something I'm not very familiar with myself personally, is just because of that time of the year. Um, I usually do about a week or two of salmon out of my boat, a couple trips in the waders, but a lot of times I'm back up in Nipigon that time of the year, so I miss out a lot of times on about half the Atlantic season. Um, when that bite's going on, especially. But guys do target the fry bite in the rapids for sure. I'd recommend when you go in the rapids, just kind of look down and look for the fry because you're going to see them.
Sure, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Looks like that was actually a happy accident because he actually meant dry fly. We did speak to that.
No, yeah, the dry fly. Like I said, I've had two clients hook fish on dry flies, both on caddis. Both on caddis, both on green caddis actually. I couldn't tell you exactly what pattern or what size exactly they were, but it's definitely a possibility. You see fish rising. You see fish rising in there. You have definitely put something to dry on.
Nice. Blake was asking if there was a live bait preference for Atlantics. I would have to imagine that's smells.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you know what? They're sucker for a deworm. If you're a gear guy, yeah. Honestly, they are sucker for a deworm. I know guys that have ran frozen smelts and stuff like that under float slim. I haven't done it. I don't see why it wouldn't work if you can get your hands on some frozen smelts, or even minnows under a float. Guys have run plastics under floats for them, just like Niagara style at the Whirlpool.
Yeah.
But if I had to say for live bait, deworm. Yeah, the resident rainbow, the summer Atlantic salmon are sucker for a deworm.
Yeah. Classic. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And we actually have one more. Probably a silly question, but where exactly are the rapids?
Oh, the rapids. Yep, the rapids. The actual address for the parking lot is One Canal Drive.
Here's something we could do. I'm going to pull up a map on my end so I can
Nice.
do a tour.
Yeah, it's actually right at the Sault Ste. Marie locks. You have to park at the lock parking lot, which and you cross over the locks, and there's a set of trails on Whitefish Island that take you over to the rapids.
What did you say the address was again, Tyler?
One Canal Drive.
Okay. Here, let's see if I can. I'm actually a little hesitant to share because I'm thinking I might screw up your thing again. Let's see.
Yeah, that's it. One Canal Drive.
Yeah, you know, I won't. Don't want to screw up your share here. Everyone can look up that and find it, I think. And that's sort of the primary access for the whole rapids.
That's the only access to the rapids.
Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
That's the only place you can access the rapids. It's free parking. They had some COVID restrictions for the parking lot, but I think that's all over now. Last time I was down there, all the pylons are finally gone and all that, so it's back to normal. Park, lock your doors, like everywhere else. But a 10-minute walk into from the parking lot to the rapids. They're about 10 minutes.
Yep, sweet. Yep. And there's a good question from Joe. Is there any kind of like alarm or notification if the water levels are changing, or is that?
Yeah. They set they actually put the news release out at the start of the month, and then they'll set an alarm off, and I think it's a half an hour or an hour before they actually do change the gates, but it's an alarm, you can't miss it.
Good. Yeah. That's at least people know what
yeah.
Or what that would mean if they heard something.
Yeah, if you do hear an alarm, get out of the water for sure, but it's no secret. You won't be the only one out there, nothing like that.
Yeah, and like Joe, I mean, you're thinking, yeah, how quickly do the water levels change? It's got to be pretty well immediate because you're right below.
It's immediately, yeah. It's absolutely immediately.
That's better at least than Niagara, where you know it's changing constantly without warnings. So
yeah, you'll know
Yeah. This might need a little clarification for Caleb. Was your guide to angler ratio? I assume that means your own clients, but maybe Caleb's just asking anglers in general on the river. Guide to angler ratio.
Usually doing 2 people, 1 to 2 people.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mm.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, pretty typical 1 to 2 people at a time kind of thing.
I'm usually doing 1 to 2 people.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, that's all the questions for now. Keep on going.
So the accommodations, I heard someone wanted accommodations, and these are the places here I recommend.
Sweet.
Yeah, there's a lot more too. These are just the 3 I've used in the past. I've done some giveaways with them. They all have great restaurants. The Quality Inn's right downtown. It's the closest one to the rapids. The Water Tower Inn's probably the furthest one, but it's probably got the best nightlife for someone that wants a little bar or something after. And Quattro is probably the best food, I would say. But there's a bunch of other places like the Delta Holiday Inn. There's little motels. There's Airbnb. And if someone's looking for a cabin rental type deal, Glenview Cottages is probably going to be your best bet. And I believe the KOA has a couple of cabins for rent.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Great intel. Right on. Yeah, trying to think if there are any more things that we missed. Somebody planning a trip. I feel like we've given you a lot to work off of there. So
yeah. If someone is want to plan, even if someone's just looking for some information for hotels and a little bit of what to do, what not to do, I don't mind answering some questions like that. I'm not going to tell someone exactly what to do, where to go. You know what I mean? But I have no problem giving someone general advice on where to go, what to stay. No problem at all. So you can contact me on my website, www.tylerdunguiding.ca, email me at tylerdunguiding.com, or shoot me a text. I tell people just shoot me a text all the time, 705-206-0984, or social media too. I'm probably on Instagram more than Facebook, but I'm on both of them. So you can find me on there at Tyler Dunn Guiding. And I have a little bit of YouTube stuff, Tyler TDG Fishing. I don't do a lot on YouTube for myself. I have more videos probably with Dan Favato than anybody on his account. But so you got any general questions, or you want questions about a trip that I offer, get in touch.
absolutely.